The presentation today, instead of going up until 3:30 or 4 o'clock, is going to knock off right around 3:15 to 3:30 so I can get dressed in time to have a 4 o'clock wedding here. So I will try to get all of the information possible out to you and answer any and all questions as we're going along. Tom, I forgot to grab a set of the plans. Would you please grab a set of the plans? They're right underneath my table on the left side. The GEET technology is a combination of several different laws of physics that, as we have discussed this with scientists around the world, they have eagerly accepted all of the lessons we've given them because they cannot explain what is going on, why it is occurring, and no two scientists anywhere in the world can agree as to what the results are other than it works. If you listen to all of the other presentations for the last few days, there are many correlating pieces of information, whether it be Nelson Camus saying that you can get energy out of urine. We have done laboratory tests in California and up in Canada, and additional tests now in Germany, that mixing urine with gasoline, diesel, or kerosene enhances the fuel 30 to 50%. So it is definitely a usable fuel. It wasn't until our technology started hitting the market that you hear speaker after speaker talking about transmutation. And that's been a dirty word in science for hundreds of years. If you can transmute something, that means you're some kind of magician. Yet at the same time, the people that have said you can't do it for all those years are now stepping up to the plate saying, okay, maybe you can, but before we accept that, prove it. We have attempted to work with universities all over the United States, and the funny thing, you go to Berkeley, UCLA, A&M, any of the major universities, they will not look at the technology, nor do they want this in their classrooms. Their funding comes from groups like the American Society of Engineers. It comes from Ford, Chrysler, oil companies. This is the last thing they really want in that classroom. They don't want any of the technology that we're talking about here to come in and destroy their money people. Yet the public has been exposed to it now, and this exposure is finally getting a lot of the colleges to take a second look at their stand. Recently, we were approached by Baylor University. They flew a guy in from Texas to our office and said, boy, we really want to work with you. We want to stand behind you. All we need is a few $100,000 up front. BYU said all they needed to do a smog test on that generator, a smog test, that's all they were going to do, was 50 grand. They're not looking at this point as being any danger to them. They're all trying to see how deep into our wallet can they reach. And if they can reach deep enough, then they're going to put their university letterhead on there and sign the bottom of it and say, yes, it works. Well, anybody who knows anything about emission control can go to any gas station with any engine and have it checked. Why should I pay some university $50,000 or $100,000? They've said, but this is scientific testing. Well, we've got a generator here. We're going to throw 3,000 watts of power to it here with a couple of heaters. I think that's the best test I can see. I don't need to have somebody with a PhD after their name taking money out of my wallet to say, yep, it works. But the American system of supporting these institutes all these years has allowed them to rape the public. During our trip, we got a hold of CNN. They wanted to interview us. We got a hold of UPS, the U.S. Mail, Coca-Cola. And as we were traveling through the different parts of this country, we invited them over for visits. None of them were interested. My question on that issue is, why aren't they interested if the United States government is giving them all of these tax benefits to research technology? Why is all that money from UPS going to 3 scientists that are friends of the company, and the only products they're willing to look at and test at the university are products they already know will not work? That way, we can get that extra few million every year and show that we're really doing research. But when you walk in with something that works, they say, no, we don't want to see it. So it's the inventors that showed up at this conference and other conferences like this that are getting the products out to the people that care. Big corporations don't care. I don't know if any of you have been following GM and the strike and all the goodies that they're doing, but there's talk in the air there that they want to lay off all union workers, and they want to shut down Saturn. Well, how many people here knew that GM owned Saturn? A lot of people didn't know that. When they bought it up, they didn't want the public to know it. But if they do close down Saturn and the rest of their car plants in the country and put all of our people out of work, the people at Saturn, when they sold out, they were smart enough to say, yeah, we'll agree to sell to you, but if you ever shut our plant down, you still got to pay us weekly wages. So we don't care if you shut the plant down. You're going to pay us. Now, because of the situation in China, where people are trying to make extra brownie points there, they're trying to take our jobs and ship them to China. One of our Russian friends in Canada was telling me that his 2 girls, one is in 1st grade, the other is in 3rd grade, came home with a note about 4 months ago. And the school announced that from that date forward, the Canadian government says you will learn Chinese, not French. Interesting twist. They're allowing as many people from China now as that want to come over to hit different parts in California, up in British Columbia. Interesting. There go our jobs, and we ship them all in here. Technology like this needs to be in the hands of the people. It needs to be built by Americans. And that's what our company's all about. Tom just put a little bit more fuel in this. I was going to go ahead and have you start it up. And I forgot my Kleenexes. Yes, that would be ideal. That'll do it. Hold on, where's the on and off button? Is it on? Oh. That'll help. Normally, when you start one of these up, you will see a cloud of smoke. And within just a few minutes, your eyes will begin to burn. Those units put out more pollution in 1 hour than 63 cars do. They're banned in many parts of the country. In Canada, they couldn't get the Canadian government to agree on banning them in certain areas. So the health department has stepped in Canada and said, that is too loud. Anyone who has a gasoline lawnmower that runs it within 100 feet of a neighbor cannot use that because it's too loud and you'll be cited for noise pollution. First offense, $100. That also stopped a lot of people from using leaf blowers and other products like that that have little motors. And in case you're not watching TV on the commercials, there's a lot of new companies opening up with new electric lawnmowers and battery pack lawnmowers. Tesla technology has been around for 100 years. We currently have one scientist who came to us with a Tesla turbine that, when properly hooked up to a small battery pack, becomes a leaf blower that doesn't make any noise. A lot of the things Tesla did, from pulling energy from the atmosphere, from the ground, a lot of these new technologies that we're seeing today through these shows, it's been around for 100 years. And most people were afraid to market them. At this point, there is no more fear. People are marketing what they want. That unit right now, if you had this hooked up to a factory generator, the way it comes from right from the factory, you should get about 600 to 700 hours use out of it and throw it away. We're getting about 10 times the life out of the engines. But the fuel savings on this model using gasoline, you're only going to get about double your running time per gallon. Instead of 6 hours or 6.5 hours, which is the longest run, we're getting between 12 and 14 on gas. When you start mixing in kerosene, diesel, lamp oil, corn oil, and a few other products, you can get it up to 18 or 19 hours on a tank. So for a backup unit, it becomes very functional. Although this is only a 5 kW, in the next 2 to 3 weeks we're anticipating having our 35 kW and a 15 kW unit for homes available. During the next few weeks, when I get home, we plan on having a 18-wheeler going down the road within 1 to 2 weeks. And we're shooting on that for triple the mileage. All of the tests we've done up to this point indicate that we should be able to hit triple or better on a diesel. I don't think any of us are going to see a decrease in shipping costs, but the trucking companies are sure going to be happy. I was told they spend anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 for those little windshields on the front or the tops of their trucks so they can get 1 or 2% better mileage. So at $10,000, if they can get triple their mileage, there's going to be a long line at every one of our shops. And there's going to be a lot of happy distributors throughout the country. The original technology, when I invented it, I couldn't tell you why it worked. And that was very frustrating for me and all the scientists that came down to see it, because they wanted the explanation. And my feeling was, here it is, it works. Why should I have to explain to you why it works? Should I go back to school to learn why it works? Scientists are very unusual people when you get to know some of them. But if it isn't in the book, forget it. It can't be done. And you got to beat them over the head. It's groups like this that come forward and they see the technology and go back and tell their friends, yes, I saw it. And they bring the scientists in saying, it works. It is very embarrassing, several of the scientists that have approached us that have said they would like to teach this in the classroom, but they didn't want to even discuss it in the classroom at this time until all the theories are written and the paperwork's done on it, because they don't want to look like idiots. So we came up with some solutions for these educated people. Our suggestion was, buy a unit, put it in front of the classroom, take it apart right in front of the students, put it back together, and run it. And then ask the students to spend the rest of the year figuring out why it works. Let the students do the work. They're a lot more open-minded than the scientists. Most of the schools said, no. Finally, we started getting scientists here in Germany and Canada that said, that's a good approach. We're going to put the entire class on the project of trying to analyze what it is and why it works. When Dr. Richter first came down He was the first scientist willing to put his name on the bottom of the line and with doctor after his name. He came down and spent a week. It was one of the most frustrating weeks of this man's life. Here he's a professor and he teaches all these great things and everything he needs to know is right there in the book and he's got all these great theories. None of them applied. He took it apart day after day, pulled the rod out, examined the rod. We changed rods. We ran all the different fuels he wanted. None of it fit the paper or the form that he was used to. So at the end of a week, he went home, and the calls began coming in. Paul, I forgot to run this test. Paul, I forgot to test for this. Paul, I forgot to test for this. Paul, I didn't think about it. Maybe we should test this instead. But he also motivated a lot of other scientists. Those other scientists have started calling up saying, I believe this might be what's happening, and you could prove it if you do this test. Well, if it takes 18 years at first just to get their attention, it's nice now to be recognized that they're saying it works. But if you put all of the scientists that have seen the technology, taken it apart, put it back together, and put them all in this room, you will not find any two of them that are willing to agree on any of the issues. They all have their own strong, firm stand of what they believe. I could spend the next 50 years, which was the estimate from several of the scientists, just studying this to try to figure out why it works. In the meantime, we can put out 50 years worth of products, and each model is going to be better than the last one. Anyone could go home right now and buy a half-inch piece of pipe, 12 to 14 inches long, put 2 elbows on it, slide it into an exhaust pipe, pull the fuel in the opposite direction, and create the exact same thing I have here. We've had children that are 8 to 10 years old, some 13 years old, that we've let them take it apart, put it back together. Even Tom's son, he played with it a little bit. When he was all done after the first day, he said, anybody can build one of these. It's simple. It's been compared to a paper clip because of its simplicity. So the technology was so close to the Pogue carburetor, to the fish, all of these different designs. They all came that close. They just didn't understand that you get that electrical field when you're going in opposite directions. The self-generated field that we induce is caused by vacuum. And when you put water in a vacuum, it can boil at room temperature. When you're running 700-800 degree exhaust heat, that means you can separate the molecules of water, because it doesn't take more than 400 to 500 degrees in a vacuum. With crude oil and other products that we've used, we've been able to crack the fuel to the point where carbon does not come out of the exhaust. No hydrocarbon, no carbon monoxide, no carbon dioxide. To do that is a very precise science of finding out what the exact length and diameter of the rod needs to be inside the exhaust pipe. It's taken, I would have to guess right now, about $3 to $4 million in model after model after model before we really started making the major breakthroughs to be able to explain to people which rod fits which fuel. If you took these two engines, which are the same engines, and you look at the size of the piston, the stroke of the piston, and you calculate out the size of the rod, normally you'd say, well, it has to be proportionate if you're going to a bigger engine. So that's what we attempted when I built the big generator. Now I've got a 13,000-pound engine. It's only about 8 foot tall, about 15 feet long. Pistons like this. I take this formula, and I had everything proportionate. We were putting out about 20 to 30 times more fuel than the engine could use. So we started reducing it, and we discovered that it doesn't have to be that big. It can be the size of a pack of cigarettes. We also found another phenomenon, because of the big one, that if I do put a bigger reactor on here and run this, I don't need to have GEET units on all the rest of the engines next to it. I can feed all the engines I want through one reaction chamber. The reason you can pull more through there in the same exact area is as you need twice the fuel to run 2 engines as you do 1, you're speeding the molecules coming through that reaction chamber at least twice as fast. The extra vacuum plus the extra speed will give you the fuel you need to run 2, 3, or 10 engines off of 1. So instead of building a huge generator with this device on it, I just need one of these sitting next to the great big generator. I put the fuel in this, I process it, and I feed from this system directly into the big engine, into the air intake. The process eliminates 95 to 99% of the pollution, not to mention the money savings in fuel. People have been asking me the types of material we've tried. Just about everything we can get our hands on, from stainless steel, brass, bronze, copper. Those things are immaterial. It is the size, the length, diameter, vacuum, all very basic things. You can build this out of $20 worth of parts from a hardware store. Go over and you pick up 2 little water valves that just open and close. One's for fuel, the other's for air. When you open one, the other opens proportionately. It's not that complex. This, if it were put on a new car, would eliminate thousands of dollars worth of equipment that's on that car right now. You don't need a catalytic converter, you don't need smog pumps, you don't need half the computer stuff. You can go back to a real basic engine where you open the hood up and you can see the engine. You can even work on it. The newer ones, we've opened some of the hoods up. There isn't enough room in there to even put a mini GEET. And that's just a little 4x4 box. But you open it up, unless you went to school to learn that engine, good luck trying to fix it. They have complicated something very simple, and all of it's been politics. Most people are not aware that Governor Brown and Governor Brown, retired, own the law firm Brown & Brown of Beverly Hills. And Brown & Brown of Beverly Hills happens to control every patent in California for smog control devices. So how do you make sure you're going to make money off your patents? You become governor and you pass laws that these things are mandated. Then, a few years later, you go, well, wait a minute, we need some more laws in here so that we can cover the new patents we're getting. So then you hand your son the money and say, here, you run for governor. And when he gets in, he passes a whole bunch of more laws and says, yes, we've got the market sewed up. It wasn't 30 days after I ran this on television the first time. The state of California passes a law. The new little law says you cannot have a fuel line within 6 inches of an exhaust pipe. Well, if you can't have a fuel line within 6 inches, then I can't bring it up the center of the exhaust pipe anymore. But that's what makes it work. Right now, all of the people in California that have bought plans from me and have been subscribing, they really don't care about the California law. They're going to do it. And they're going to take a stand against the government. They feel they have the right to triple the mileage. And I believe each one of us do. I believe we all have a right to fresh air. I've invited any and all inventors anywhere in this country, anywhere in the world that would like to work with our company to come forward and to become a stronger team. When I put that offer out, it was only because a couple of inventors had come to me saying, Paul, you are getting ahead in the business. You're getting out to distributors, and I really don't want to do that. I've got the inventions, or I've got the knowledge to do these things, but I'm not a marketing man. I'm not a manufacturer. I just want to be an inventor. So if that's what they want, they can come to us. We'll help them manufacture. We'll get it out to our distributors. And we've set up a network of good, solid people from coast to coast that are selling to their neighbors, their friends, and they're putting them on their own equipment. There's a Christian community that flew in a week ago to our office, and they bought the plans. They called up a couple days ago and said that everybody in their community wants one. I said, well, the plans are limited. You can only build 10 sets, or 10 engines off of one set of plans. And they said, well, how about if we just pay you the additional $65, which is what it boils down to, per vehicle for every vehicle in the community? I said, that sounds fair to me. So they passed the hat the other day, and the first 5,000's on its way, but everybody in their community wants one or more. And by having a staff of people out there doing this, it makes my job a lot easier. They have put together an engineering team from their own company that they're footing the whole bill so that they can start building the units for each member of their church. And I think it's great. They're hiring their own people to put it on their own cars. And they're also looking at putting it on every piece of equipment they have. Tractors, generators, they want to be totally self-sufficient. And any community can do it. It's just a question of do they want to. Most of the people we find in this country that talk about ecology, that's all they do is talk. Over the years, I got a hold of Sierra Club, the Wilderness Club, Greenpeace. I couldn't even get callbacks from them. I kept trying and trying. I finally got a few of them to call back. And I said, why is it that I've tried to get an appointment with you people to show you that we can clean up pollution, and nobody in your organization seems to care? The standard response was, if they knew about you, they're not going to send us donations. And we don't have new cars, we don't have new houses, and we have to go look for jobs. Sorry, that's pretty sad. I've mentioned this a few times on the radio, and I also mentioned that I have a couple of those conversations on tape, because I figured they're going to jump up and down and scream about that. You can't say that about us. Yes, I can. Just like Pantone oil. The day I was on TV, the following morning by 8:15, I had already received calls from the state of California, CARB, C-A-R-B, they're quality people. They informed me I was going to go to jail if I had one of these on a car, or if I ever ran it on water. Pantone Oil Company had one of their executive vice presidents in charge of production call me up. He had heard of us from Southern California, and we're in Northern California. But somebody got on the horn and said, this is a threat. So they said it would be worth a minimum $1 million to have my head removed. And I kept saying, hello, hello, what number are you at? I'll have to call you back. I can't hear you. So he gave me his name and number. After he hung up, I went ahead and hooked up the second tape recorder and called him back. I said, now, let me see if I got this straight. It's worth $1 million for my head removed. And he said, yes, you heard me correct. I start playing the tape recorder. I said, well, I just wanted to make sure I got that word for word when I taped the conversation. He said, you taped my call? I said, yes, I did. I thought the news would like to hear this one. Well, he hears the tape in the background, and he starts swearing at me. Well, I let him go on and on for a few seconds. I hung up on him again. Switched the tapes back around. I called him back, and I let him know I taped the second conversation. He had a few other choice words before he hung up on me. But I made it very much to his attention that I do tape my calls whenever I'm being threatened. And I also let him know that there were a lot of news people out there that were very interested in copies of all those tapes. Well, when I called Kent Pierce back at Channel 3, the day after I did that first TV interview, and I said, you think you got a story yesterday watching an engine run on crude oil. I got a story that's even bigger. How about death threats? And I told him who'd called, the threats I'd received, the different state agencies that called threatening me. And he finally cut me off. He said, Paul, even if you walked on water, you will never be on the news here again. He said, I almost lost my job because I didn't have permission to put you on the news. And when my producer found out what I put on the news, it came down on me. Because right now I'm told what I can cover, when I can cover it, and how I'm going to cover it. So don't call again. You don't have anything that's newsworthy. It isn't the first time while we were doing the trip in the last 18 years that we've had the news respond like that. We've been invited a few times, CNN, Fox, different channels. But the minute they check with their executive producers, they say, no way. Do not put this on the news. Some of the littler stations will, because they don't really care about the big guys. So those are the stations we're going after as fast as we can. Here in Arizona, we went down the entire list of phone numbers in April, and we started calling back this time. You see how many reporters showed up? None. Now, why is it that they tell you in the news that they really want to clean up the pollution problem when they really don't? Anytime during my presentation, if you have any questions, raise your hand, please. Because I know when I'm in that audience and I have a question and I have to wait for an hour to ask it, I usually forget what the question was, long before the hour. In the plans that we have that have gone out all over the world, we give very simple, when I get down to that part, very simple drawings so that you can understand, without going to college, how to build one. We have found that many people would really like to see great big blueprints and engineered drawings, but they're not needed. You can machine everything out. Some of our dealers have built them out of plastic, out of wood. In New Jersey, when we were back there, one of our dealers showed up and he had hooked up just the small engine to an alternator with a spring load to it so he could run the alternator. And he had built the entire bubbler chamber and fuel delivery system all out of plastic. He went down and bought some plumbing parts, screwed it all together. He spent less than $20. MIT was there to test it. They were brought in by the state of New Jersey Department of Transportation. The United States Army was there. Dun & Bradstreet was there. The EPA was there. We had 50 different divisions represented there to either prove we worked or prove we were a fraud. After 6.5 hours of testing being monitored every 2 minutes by the gentleman from MIT, he threw his pad on the floor and his pencil on the floor and left the building, very upset. When I saw him heading for the door and grumbling, I ran over to my technician. I said, what happened? He said, he's not going to give you a written report. I said, why not? He said, well, he's afraid that if he puts his name on a report saying that he just saw a 10 horsepower engine running on water, Mountain Dew, used engine oil, used transmission fluid, a bunch of junk with a little bit of gas. But it ran for over 22 minutes on 1 ounce of fuel. And he said that it was physically impossible, and because of that, he would not wreck his reputation telling anyone what he saw. I kind of got a kick out of it because a few guys were there from Harvard, Princeton, a couple of students from Princeton with their father who graduated from there, and they were all laughing at him. None of them, though, were willing to put anything in writing. Dun & Bradstreet did. They said it was like walking into the next century with what they saw. The U.S. Army, the man came over to me, shook my hand. It took 6.5 hours for him to be convinced it really worked. He said, this is the greatest thing I have seen. The Army needs this so bad because of all the pollution and garbage we have stored all over the United States. He says, I'm going to personally walk this up to the commander and to his commander, however far up I have to go. A week and a half later, I called him up and said, how are we doing? He says, I was told to shut my mouth and ignore this. End of story. We got a hold of NASA. Asked them if they were interested. Absolutely they were interested. I got a fax to that effect. Got back in touch with the guy a week later, and he says, no, we're not interested. We got a hold of a few of the military bases. There's one in California out there by Edwards. They've got about a 15 to 20,000 gallon pit where they dump the jet fuel. What doesn't evaporate goes down into the soil. They can't reuse it. After a plane's gone to a certain elevation and it lands, whatever fuel's left in the plane is drained and fresh fuel's put in. They just dump it on the ground. They'd be willing to pay $2 or $3 a gallon to have it hauled off. Well, I can't have it because I'm going to turn it back into electricity. They don't want that. Some of the resistance we've had is sad. And others are just plain ridiculous. I mean, they've got the problem sitting there, and they're not looking for solutions. Molly and I got so fed up with some of these things, that's why we decided we're going to buy 2 hours of airtime every Sunday morning, and we're going to get out there and reach people. And we do a pretty good job on that one. And it's amazing how many people that work for our government in those positions that when they hear some of the stuff that's going on, they call up and say, hey, wait a minute, I work for the EPA. What do you mean we don't have authority? And then I explain it to them, how we got 2 resumes from EPA officials, and we got 5 letters that day saying it's a voluntary program. They even told me what section of the law it was. Some of these guys got a little upset because here they are running around taking people's vehicles that do not comply when they don't have the legal right to do it. So we're trying to educate the people as fast as we can as we travel. We're going to be including, for anyone who buys a GEET device, we want to make sure they have a copy of that letter. So that when you go in to register your car, which I just did recently in Salt Lake, I held the letter up and I said, what do you mean I have to have my car smog tested? By whose laws? It says here from the federal government it's a voluntary program. Did you volunteer me? All of a sudden, you're going to see some people passing the buck. They've done it up in Salt Lake. It's gone from one department to another, to another, to another, to another. No cop wants to write me a ticket for not having registration. They'd rather walk away from this one because of the publicity. It's also against the law in some states. Yesterday, we had a state official here, and he was telling me that in Arizona, if your car is too clean, not enough pollution coming out the tailpipe, they cannot pass it. They have minimum standards here like they do in Utah, California, Texas, and Alaska. So if you have 0 emissions, park it. If you have a catalytic converter on your car, you are doing 3 to 5 times more damage to the atmosphere than if you took it off and threw it away. The EPA just released that to the public. And it was printed on the front page of the New York Times about a month ago. Yet, if you take that catalytic converter off your car, you can get a $25,000 fine. Something is wrong with the system, folks, big time. We've got so many laws that are really ridiculous. I mean, Molly and I just love pointing out some of these stupid ones. There was a city that was on the news the other day that decided this one couple shouldn't be allowed to feed the birds. So they passed a law in that town, wasted a lot of county time, but they passed the law saying if you excessively feed birds, you can be fined. Then they had the building department go out every hour, 7 days a week, every hour during the day, to check on these people to see how much food they were feeding the birds. They cited these people. It's a good waste of money. Have an employee, $20 an hour and plus car expenses, driving back and forth every hour to see how many birds are in the yard. They pulled him into court, and the judge ruled that the law, when it was passed saying excessively feeding the birds, wasn't clear enough. So now they have to redo the law, wasting more taxpayer money, so it's very specific on how much you can feed a bird. I really thought we had better things to do in society, but we have gotten to be really petty on some of these things. Another one that really got me going, gentleman in, I believe it was here in Arizona, who lives out by a desert at the edge of a hill. The neighbors filed a complaint with the county because his flagpole is 22 feet tall and it blocks their view of the mountain. They've informed him he must lower the flag and pole to no higher than 10 feet. The gentleman was very upset. He and his brother fought in the war, World War II, I believe it was, and he lost his brother in the war. And he said, it's pretty appalling when you've gone out and lost loved ones and fought for your country and you can't even have your own flag in the yard. The number of laws we pass right now waste so much of your money it isn't funny. We need to get something done in every state. We're asking all the different states to get us the feedback we can from each area so that we can cut through this red tape. The gentleman that was here yesterday from the state said he will personally walk the product in and present it to the council, and if they approve it, then they can get the law changed. But in the meantime, Nelson's unit couldn't be used because of the law. This technology can't be used because of their laws. And you've got to have pollution. Now, on the other hand, the federal government has stepped in here and said, you've got 2 years to convert at least 20% of your fleet to alternative fuels. I said, well, that's great. You got 5,500 cars out there that I can lay claim to and start fixing, but it's against the law for me to put my device on there. I said, what are you doing now for those conversions? He says, liquid natural gas, liquefied. They're bombs. Don't hit one. Good luck putting a fire out when that thing ruptures. The problem is they're losing 5% of their mileage because of inefficiency. Yet they're doing it at a cost to the taxpayer here between $7,000 and $10,000 per car. Yes?
Police complain because they don't have the time out there on the road, so they have to go back more often to get refueled. They don't have to pick up to the high speed, plus the lower efficiency, or the lower mileage.
Well, the local police were very upset here this last week. One of the officers smelled a gas leak. He pulled over in their lot, got out of the car, and as he was closing the door, that spark was all it took to ignite it. Well, immediately the flame travels back to where the leak in the tank is. Now you've got high pressure tank pushing that fuel out, and the fire extinguisher isn't even going to touch it. It torched the car in just a matter of minutes. In the meantime, a few of the other cars around there got scorched. And he said, this is a common problem with that system. The police department has found they can no longer go in high-speed chases because when you hit the gas pedal, the car doesn't go. It picks up gradually. And buses, they're putting them on. I told them, I said, before you put any more on buses, get a hold of Detroit. Get a hold of Salt Lake. I gave them a list of all the different places I've talked to where they're pulling every bus back off the road, putting them in storage yards because the engines are burning up. You only get about 30% of the engine life with their technology. So although there are good technologies out there, they're not looking at them. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Does this, the pipe that is coming through, would that be standing up, or does it have to lay down horizontally?
The fuel reactor can be in any position. If you're building the fuel delivery system as a furnace, instead of having a pipe like that, you have a chimney. Your fuel comes into the top, comes down the center where the flame would be, and comes back out the side, then loops around the bottom and comes in as the new fuel. It can be built as a furnace, a boiler, a hot water heater, can be used for any application of energy. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, you can reduce that pollution factor by 95 to 99%. But at the same time, we can get rid of a lot of unwanted products that we're now putting in storage. I called the Oak Ridge, Tennessee group. Asked them how much storage do they currently have. And I'm not looking for the atomic waste, just all the rest of the junk they had. And the figure was in the trillions of gallons. A lot of those products cannot be stored for more than 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years in the container they're in. So they have to keep dumping it from one container into another one. And they can't get rid of the old container either because it's contaminated now. It just doesn't make sense to keep storing it. Because sooner or later, some of the barrels are going to leak. And you have a mess. I met a gentleman that was in the service in the 40s in Stockton, California, at their storage depot. And he said at the end of the war, our government had fleets of these trucks hauling chemicals that they wanted to just dispose of, get rid of this stuff, into the deserts on the other side of Salt Lake City. And as they got out to the deserts, they just opened the lids and dumped the stuff out. Good place to get rid of it. Nobody's going to notice it. It's going to be 50 years before it hits the water, maybe. There are places now in Salt Lake where they're finding crude oil and other products that are surfacing from the top end of the lake, which are now contaminating the lake. At the rate it's going, it might have another 10 or 15-year lifespan before it's not safe to get in the lake. We haven't screamed loud enough at our government for what it's done and what it's continuing to do. But hopefully, in the next year or two, there'll be enough people that are listening. And it isn't just about this technology. There's people out there saying, hey, look at the Y2K. What's going to happen? I've asked quite a few people to call us for different purposes. One of them, during our radio broadcast, I said, if anybody out there is an engineer that works at a nuclear power plant, please give me a call. I'd like to know what's going to happen if the computers go off. Can we manually operate an atomic power plant right now? All of them have said, if you live close to one and the computers go down, you got 2 to 5 days, and you better be out of town. Only one of all the people that work at power plants who came to this show said, well, no, there is a fail-safe device that if the power does go out and the computers go down, then the rods just immediately drop back in the water, but we can't do a darn thing about it at that point. And he said, I'm not really even sure we could restart it. So we do have some very unusual situations like that. Years ago, I got mad at my bank. I was dealing with a bank up in Washington, and I had deposited a check for $25,000 and gone out and wrote a few checks. It was a certified check. The bank decided they were going to hold it for 21 days to make sure it cleared. So they froze my account. My checks started bouncing. I went to the bank and said, what's going on here? And they said, well, we put a hold on it. I said, I see. Well, I want my money then. I'm closing my account. They said, you can't. I said, oh, okay, we'll see. So I filed a suit against them for fraud. And I asked for the exact amount that I had in the bank, plus all bounce charges, plus every bank charge from the day I opened my account. I had subpoenas served on the manager, the teller who took my check, and the girl who opened my account. The only witness I really wanted was the girl who opened my account. Because when I got her up on the stand as #1 witness, I asked her if she brought the documents that I'd subpoenaed. She said yes. I said, can you show the court what you have? And she held up a signature card. How many of you in this room have ever filled out a signature card for the bank? Everybody. How many of you were aware that you signed a contract and it said on the back side of it, not on the front, on the back side of it, that you agree to all the terms and conditions of the contract? Most people don't know that. As a matter of fact, the judge didn't know that. So when I said, well, how come you didn't give me a copy of a contract if I signed one? He said, well, I didn't know you were signing a contract. I thought this was just a signature card. And at that point, the judge says, bring me the card. So I walked over and handed it to him. And he looks at it and turns it over. He says, so I have a contract with you too, huh? The bank manager realized at that point he really blew it coming to this one, because he lost. I was awarded all my money back, all the fees they charged me, everything.
Why would I hold you a check for 21 days?
Because it was drawn on a bank in Michigan, and I was up in Washington. Yeah. I've had certified funds refused. From Chase Manhattan Bank, Bank of Hong Kong, Bank of Canada. Banks play their games. And when they do that, I move to a new bank. But after I brought that to the bank's attention, you know, you go into People's Bank now up in Seattle, and when they have you fill out the cards, they give you a copy, and they also give you a complete copy of the bank rules. Their attorney for the bank was present in the courtroom. Never got up to say a word. He had to come up at the end and talk to the judge. And he looked at the card and he said, you know, I never realized that it said that on the back of the card. He said, I represent almost every major bank in Oregon and Washington. He says, they're all operating illegally. But when you start reading the fine print of what that contract says, it says if they close their doors tomorrow morning and do not reopen, you have no access to your money or interest on your money until they are open again to the public. If they don't open up again, you don't have any money. But it also says any money that you owe that bank is still a debt to the bank, and they have the right to come in and immediately collect any funds. Well, guess what? You got a mortgage on your house. You can't make the payments because they got your money, but they can demand your note in full. There's a lot of things those banks can do, and they've been doing it for a long time. We try to expose things like this in our company. During one of our tests, we went to the utility company to get electric meters so we could accurately measure the energy we were producing. The nice gentleman at the utility company said, how accurate do you want the meter? What do you mean, how accurate? He said, well, we have meters that are 5% accurate. Within 5%, we have some that are 20%, we have some that are 40%. In their favor. We said, well, is there one that's accurate? He's not made in this country. Only one company over in Switzerland makes an accurate meter. So we did some further checking. And you hook up a meter here and a meter down below, and the power's going through both of them. You can be off 30, 40%. They got a special code number at the bottom of it that tells you how inefficient they are. I called the Department of Weights and Measures. I said, I've got a dumb question. If somebody is selling me a pound of something, does it have to be an exact pound? They said, yes. I said, if I'm buying a gallon of gas, does it have to be an exact gallon? They said, within 1/10 of 1%, yes. I said, okay. If I'm buying power from a utility company or water from a utility company, do you or anyone make sure that the measuring device is properly tested? They said, no, we haven't since 1913. When all the utility companies in the United States got together, presented to Congress that they should be exempt from the weights and measures. And they were granted the exemption. Immediately after that, they started manufacturing a lot of their own meters. Now, best meters we have in the country are only 5% off in their favor. Most of them are about 10 to 15. So if you go back for the last 10 or 15 years that you've paid a utility bill and it's only 10% off, how much money do they owe you? A whole bunch. that could be one of the largest class action suits to ever hit them. I hope it doesn't. I'd like to see the people start switching over so they don't need that meter on there. But they have been burning us all along. They didn't want Tesla's information out. They didn't want other information out. And at this point, I think they can see the handwriting on the wall that the people are going to get what they want. It's just a question of how soon. We've got a lot of people right now that have contacted us from other states, other countries. Some of the islands in the Pacific there, where power for your home is 85 cents a kilowatt. We've been told of some of the places up in Alaska that are going through hardships, where they can barely afford to feed their families because of the high cost of everything. And good luck if you run out of your fuel in the middle of winter and you have to have it flown in, because it isn't going to be $4 or $5 a gallon. You better plan on about 8 to 10. Yes?
I'm not advocating this in all seriousness, but there's a way to offset their meter with magnetite compromise. But even an offset, again, flame level is field is up there. Magnetite is like black sand. You have to make sure it has a dose of about 10,000. As I said, I'm not advocating this, but I know of people that have, put it this way, in theory, not just in theory, but in fact, it will even off the spikes, and you can knock off about 30% of this. Well, those are plans that we will market to people. No, those are things, again, I'm not at all advocating, but there are people that I am told have dug a hole into the ground and put about, say a 5-gallon bucket, three-gallon bucket of magnetite around the power line, and that solves the problem of the spikes.
I've
It's real ugly if they find out about it, so be wise.
We've heard of that technology, and there's several others like that. In Utah, there was a gentleman going out and putting devices on homes right under the panel for you. It was a nice little box that would also balance out your load for you. People were saving 50 to 60%. The utility company there got very upset over it when they found out there was about 100 people that had these. So they took out a full page in the Salt Lake Tribune for a week. Said, if you see one of these on your neighbor's home, please warn them that they are extreme fire danger. The company ended up getting a lot of calls saying, come get this thing off my house. They did. They removed them. They ended up going bankrupt a few months later because they couldn't sell product. Now, it's their word against yours. They're a big, reputable company. And the average public person is going to listen to whatever they see in the newspaper or on the news. We had one reporter, as we were traveling around, that got Molly off to the side, and we were talking about the different things we've heard on the news that we know are BS. And he said, yeah, anything I say on television, they buy it. And she's, well, but what do you mean by that? He says, I can say anything I want on TV. And when I do, the public is so stupid, they believe it. We've been trained to watch CNN, ABC, the different programs. And boy, we believe everything that's on there. And then all of a sudden you see some of these little offshoots. I don't know if any of you saw that special about, I think it was about a month ago, on the Black Panthers, what really happened during that massacre. The police said they fired first, the Black Panthers. Absolutely not. The first bullet went through the door at a certain angle. The only fire from inside out was as the door opened the rest of the way because of the angle of the bullets. From that point all the way through it, it was just a massacre of all these cops just unloading every gun they had to make sure everybody in that room was dead. Now,
concrete proof of what happened. Now, one officer in the massacre even got a hand slapped. But this stuff, it happens all the time. We do have some decent reporting out there, but there's no follow-up. I mean, what good is it to say, well, no, these guys really were innocent. We just went in there and massacred them all. There's no punishment to fit the crime? Doesn't make sense. Especially when I've been threatened over my invention, not lately, but back in the 80s. They really did not want to see a car running on water, so I had to vary that model for a while. They didn't really want to see a car that can get a 99% reduction in pollution. Not unless I'm paying payola to the right people. My offers so far have been, I can work with the director of the United Nations Technology Transfer, Mr. Bendak, which I won't do. Or I can work with a couple of oil companies that have got some interesting offers, which I won't do. Department of Transportation in New Jersey. All I have to do is bring him in as a partner, and hey, I got every car in New Jersey. It's amazing on how many of these people that are in public office have that wallet open saying, okay, put it here, then we're partners, and hey, then I'll get your product out there. We won't work with them. Instead, I give out their name and phone numbers, their fax numbers. And after they get 200-300 calls, they have answering machines. Yes?
I don't know if it's appropriate to say it now, but 1976, a group of us funded an operation that was a backroom situation at Fermilab in Batavia. And two of the top engineers there, one of whom was a cryogenics engineer, the other one was, did the, I'll call it the targeting system for the cyclotron. Basically developed a rotary expander motor, external combustion, low temperature, low pressure. Developed a simple material burner for desulfurized powdered coal. We used a non-polluting fluorocarbon to produce steam. And with that system, it is according to those engineers, and these were people that, no axe to grind, they weren't trying to sell anything, but it is the most efficient, effective way to produce rotary shaft power that's ever been devised. We put a prototype in a Lincoln Continental Mark IV. Our one fellow who was calculating built it twice as big as it had to be. It's about this big around, about two-phase system. And we're able to drive the car up and down the road on compressed air. I have all the parts, all the plans, all the pictures, and here we are 20-some years later, and nothing's been done. It is 50 applications for it, a motor, compressor, a pump, and you can burn anything, external combustion, let it burn. You can make a system as large as this building, would burn garbage, pollution-free, virtually it would be a complete burn because of some of the concept technology with the GEET system of reusing, in this case, reusing gases, et cetera. It simply is, there is no crisis we've caused, the oil companies have caused this crisis.
You're right on that. During the last 2 years, we've had inventors just pop in on us, 700 of them one year. One of them came to us. He built an engine. It's about 3 inches tall, 7 inches wide, about 20 inches long. It only puts out 250 horsepower. Doesn't use much fuel either. Another inventor came to us with a ball, a piston ball engine. It's got a ball that just bounces back and forth in it, which causes the whole unit to spin very much like the technology you're talking about. Only these can be mass-produced for under $100 and put out up to 400 horsepower. Another gentleman.
This thing too.
Yeah, peanuts.
32 moving parts. You can make it to last 1,000,000 miles, or the way it was done at the prototype plans for 3-generation prototype plans were ceramic type housing, throwaway motor. You can pop another one in when it wears out.
Another inventor came to us with a Dynacam. I believe it's 41 inches long, 16 inches round, puts out about 480 horsepower. Nice little engine. But building them one at a time like he's doing right now, they're costing him $25,000 to $30,000 a pop. If he could set it up as an assembly line and get the price down to about $600 a pop. Nobody wanted to back him. Our company is seriously looking at trying to work with him to get that for one of our cars. Tremendous horsepower. Hello?
This system, no rear end, no drive shaft, two small motors about this size for the front wheels. The military application is just impressive. We had a self-sealing tip seal system that a old farmer up in Wisconsin figured out with some of the best engineers in Ferguland. That tells you the thing about the Tinker inventor type.
Yes. Some of the inventors we're working with right now don't even want their names mentioned. They're really afraid that the government would come in and close them down. Other inventors are pretty open about everything and bubbly. Some of them only have one product. Others come to us and they've got a flock of them. I mean, pick the field. Myself, I have about 450 inventions. I quit counting. I was talking with somebody a little earlier today about my son. From the time he was about 4 years old on, I played a game with him called Inventions. And whenever the little guy looks bored, I hand him a piece of paper and a pencil and I say, it's time for inventions. You got 10 minutes to come up with anything you can that goes in this room that's new. Well, the last time I played it with him, he was 11. And he had about 10 minutes to spare before he was going to the neighbor's house for a birthday party. And I saw he was getting a little bit edgy there, just waiting. Come on, 10 more minutes. So I slip a piece of paper over there and a pencil, and I said, okay, inventions. He said, huh? Yeah. And he starts looking around the kitchen. Toaster cover, sitting right there, shaped like a big toe, covers the toaster, and in the top, when you flip the nail up, you've got your sprinkles and your cinnamon and sugar and blah, 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 and butter. And next to the toaster cover, you have the Lover's waffle iron. On one side, it gives you great big heart-shaped waffles. And when you turn the plate over, it gives you 4 little waffles in the heart shape for the little lover in your life. And he sat there, 20 different inventions in 10 minutes. It was just boom, 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 boom. But every one of them, he was doing like a commercial, trying to throw the humor in there. I told him to go to the party. But when you encourage that, watch out. From the time he was about 4 years old on, he would go off to his room, pencil, pens, whatever was handy, and he would sit there and write stories. Book after book after book. Just something to do. By the time he got up to 3rd grade, 4th grade, he's in the computers, doing everything. Then he starts writing better books. Higher quality, better balance. He did one book that had 7 different types of things that would come out of the book, pop out at you, slide up or down. Each one was a little different on each page. And they don't even bother to give him tests anymore at school. Yeah, he's in special education. Do whatever you want, David. But he is so creative, he can also get himself in trouble on that one. He realized his teacher was a little depressed at this one school he was at. And she's single, and the principal's single, so he wrote some real nice poetry, put the principal's initials on the bottom, and slipped it into her desk. Teacher was all bubbly that week. Next week, he slipped another one in there. After about 4 or 5 of these cute little poems, the teacher went and talked to the principal. Principal came down to the classroom. He said, I don't know which one of you is responsible for these very nice poems. You should get an A for the poems, but we don't need any more help. We are going to go out to dinner. My son was worried. He came home after school and he said, Dad, I think I may have gotten myself in trouble this time. I said, what? And he told me what he'd done. Okay. Should I expect a call from the principal? He says, no, I didn't invent, I did it. I see. Well, I think the right thing to do would be to go back to the principal and tell him you'd like to get that A for the poacher. He said, but I'm going to be in trouble. I said, no, you won't. He'll have more respect for you. He went back to school and told the principal. The principal calls me up. He said, would you have a problem if your son was advanced a year or two in school? I said, no, why? He's way advanced for the class he's in. He should not be here. He should be up a few grades. I said, I don't have a problem with that. He said, we'll make arrangements immediately. He says, we didn't know he was doing algebra. I said, he's what? Well, one of the kids at school got in trouble at another school because they couldn't do the homework. And my son, while he was over playing with a couple of kids his own age, helped this other girl do her homework. She got an A. But I didn't know he knew algebra. He's not old enough to know algebra. Wrong. He has had a ball learning things and being advanced and creating whatever he wants to do. We had at least 10 people in the last 2 years that we hired at our office to come in and work on the computers. And every time they couldn't figure out how to get into a program or how to get something right, he'd walk in there and say, oh, that's easy, you just do this. And he'd pull it up for them. There are so many people that go to these computer classes at the colleges. They've learned one thing or two things on how to put a program in, but that's all they can do. And they come in saying, I'm an expert. How many of you have lost things on your computers because of experts? I know we have. A mailing list. After 4 years of putting it all in there, all of a sudden one of the secretaries didn't realize you just don't turn the power off. You have to get the program back to a certain place. And she went in there and turned the power off to everything. We lost all of that information. It took Molly and I a month and a half of going through every single note, going back for years, one page at a time, because we don't fill things like that out. Put it all back in the computer. They lost it again. So I'm really not that much of a computer-friendly person myself. I kind of like things in black and white where I can see them in my hand. As far as the technologies coming to us right now, one of the inventors that brought his technology to us is a tire recycling machine. It can process 300 tires per hour, turning it all into good, usable byproducts. Another gentleman has a machine, 12 feet long, 4 feet high, 3 feet wide. The frequency that it generates in its field will pull 200,000 gallons of water out of the air every day, even in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Another gentleman who can take care of the garbage problems, processing it through a microwave field. Vapor coming off can be used to run a GEET. The byproduct at the end, when it's encapsulated, becomes a fireproof building material. When applied to sheetrock, it can withstand 7,000 degrees. It's little technology like this from all over the world, and we get bombarded with it. Yes?
I haven't seen it, but I'm told that the process of funding right now, one drop of water, how many computer programs do you want to have in that one drop of water? This is where they're at. It's beyond, I mean, this thing, some friends of mine in Tucson just saw it. I'm not doing justice to this, but in essence, rather than using for, say, the software that you think of as a throttle, how about a drop of water that has it all in it? We are talking of quantum leap here.
Yeah. But it's happening in all fields. That's the beauty of it right now. It is happening in all these fields simultaneously. So having this many new products thrown at us right this minute, we get to say, oh, okay, we can hook this up to this one and this one up to this one, and we've got something that's even 5 times better than any one of them by themselves. One of the inventors in Texas calls up. He has got a chip he invented that speeds up a 486 300 times its normal speed. That sounded pretty good to me. Another guy comes to me and says he designed this in hopes that IBM or somebody would like it. It's a little briefcase. It's the entire computer in a briefcase. Looks pretty neat. Another guy comes to us. He's got a color printer that prints at 300 times the normal speed. There's a marketplace for this. Another guy calls up, and he's been playing with his scanner, and he can scan now at 300 plus times the normal speed. Now, all we need is the right programmer to put all of this together that can write the program that can go 300 times the normal speed. But electronics is outdated daily, as you were just pointing out. Many of the fields are. A lot of people said, Paul, if these are not efficient, why are you using them? Because right now the entire world has equipment. It's all dinosaur. It's junk. It is not efficient. The one small ball piston engine that was offered to us, according to the scientific tests so far to date, they're claiming it has a 99.9% efficiency compared to some of the other junk we've looked at. It'll be outdated before they can come off the assembly line. The new technologies just keep pouring in faster and faster and faster, and that ball is moving at full speed. We're taking orders for these right now, but don't be surprised if the time it takes us to catch up, 4 to 6 weeks, you don't get this engine, it'll be the new and improved. Because we're constantly trying to upgrade everything we do. And if somebody got in at this level and the new and improved comes out, you're going to get the next model coming out the door. Yes? Okay. The GEET units are designed to work on any type of fuel. We've hooked it up to coal boxes where we took just the vapor from coal and wood and then used that through the bubbler in the GEET. That reduces the pollution that normally would come out of a wood stove by about 99%. There are ways of building wood stoves today where you would get a 99% reduction in pollution. In many areas, such as Salt Lake, you cannot use your fireplace on certain dates because of the pollution problems. But with a modification to those fireplaces and wood stoves, you could use them every day. Whenever it's cold, use it. I'm sorry, what was the other part of that? Oh, the generators, when the smaller unit, we have run the 10-horse engines right off the top of the septic tank using the methane from the tank. The average family of 3 people will produce enough methane each day to run a generator for 8 to 10 hours. So if you have a bigger family, you can get a lot more power. Several communities that we're talking to right now are going to be building special septic systems just for that purpose, so they can have their own electricity. Any other questions? The GEET device will fit any age vehicle, any type fuel. It's just a matter of configuring it just a little bit different for different vehicles. No. That's a tough one. Can any mechanic do it? Did you see the mini GEET? It's just a real simple little box. It has water in, water out, fuel in, fuel out. That's it for parts. Comes with all the brackets, hoses, and everything. I personally took it to 13 different mechanics when I got to Nashville, Tennessee, trying to find one mechanic that could put it on a car. I couldn't. We went from shop to shop, and they'd look at the thing. Well, I don't know what this is. I said, it's a fuel heater. Can you install this for me? No, I don't think so. I don't think I can. 2 of the places we went to were dealerships. Chevy dealership should be able to work on a Suburban. Well, I'm sorry. If it's not in our book, we can't bid it. What do you mean bid it? Your shop time is $47 an hour. I'll pay you $47 an hour. Just put it on the car. Well, that isn't the way we work here. The sign says $47 an hour. He said, well, yeah, but before I can charge you or know how much to charge you, I've got to look in my book at how many hours they say it's supposed to take. And that's how much we bill you for, not how many hours we use. Everything's done by the book. So the way he explained it to me, a mechanic can put in 40 hours that week and get paid for 90 hours. As long as the book said it was a 4-hour job, that's what you charge the customer. More honesty in our business. But it was upsetting. I could not find one single mechanic in Nashville. Couldn't find one in Memphis. Couldn't find one in Oklahoma City. We finally got down to Atlanta. Then we had one good old boy who showed up there, and kind of longish hair and real kick back. I had mentioned we couldn't find any mechanics in the last few towns. He said, for what? I showed him the little box. He said, what would it take, 20 minutes to install? I said, I don't know, why don't you try it? So, all right. He went out to his truck. 35 minutes later, he was done. But he did it in front of another state dealer who said he couldn't find a mechanic willing to install it in all of Miami. Trying to find a mechanic that'll do anything under the hood that isn't in his book, good luck. So on our radio program, we've been announcing we're looking for mechanics, backyard mechanics, mechanics that are tired of working where they're at and want to do something good. Get a hold of us. We're getting the calls now from all over. Not enough. But if it says ACE, or what is it, American Society of Engineers, if they've got badges up here, they can't even begin to touch a GEET. They don't understand anything. When they open the hood on my car and they stand there staring at it going, what is it? Why would you do that? Some of our dealers have had a little bit more fun with it than others. I mentioned yesterday how one of our dealers, when he came out and built the smoker box, he wanted to go home and build one for his own car, and he built the first one for his car out of oak. Now, I can just imagine that first mechanic, because he loves showing off his work, but he gets in there and opens that hood up, and that first mechanic's over there looking at it. What is it? It's a carburetor. It's wood. Well, yeah. Carburetors aren't wood. Sure they are. It works a lot better than this old one. I never thought of building one out of wood until I saw his. And I'm going, all the money I spent having all these things machined, and I could have done it for peanuts. Never thought of it. But that's why we look for these type of creative people. I can't think of everything I need to test on my engine, but I put 500 of these out in the field, in universities' hands, in tinkerers' hands, in other inventors' hands, and they're all in there doing their thing, and they keep calling me up every day or two and faxing me every day or two. Hey, I just figured this out. Hey, I just figured this out. I got 500 R&D shops, and it's not costing me anything. I'm getting paid while they do my R&D. It was the fastest way to get the technology out there. You sell a few hundred sets of plans, you got hundreds of people out there building these things, and they're all telling you, hey, if you change this fitting to this, it works a little better. Thank you. Over and over, all these people calling up to keep us posted to every step that they're doing. Of course, then again, you do have a downside to that. We sold one set of plans to a scientist in Germany. He put it on his Volkswagen, tested it, and he wrote me back a nasty little fax saying he's only getting double his mileage. I'm a crook. Well, he called up with an interpreter a little later that day, and his English wasn't much better, but we sat there chatting about what he had done. And he was telling me, well, the rod is so long, and that's what we put in the thing. I said, well, what are you using for fuel? He said, gasoline. I said, the rod you're using is for crude oil. The gasoline is the other rod. Oh, okay. So then he puts the other rod in. And instead of running on gasoline, now he puts crude oil in. He calls back. I'm still not getting the mileage. I said, what size rod? He told me. I said, well, it should work. He said, no, it's almost identical readings. I said, what are your readings? So he starts telling me the readings. I said, well, that doesn't sound like it's burning right. I said, what grade of gas are you using? He says, gas? I'm using crude oil. I said, drain the tank, put some gas in there, and call me back. So drains the tank, rinses it out, fills it with gas, calls me back. Now he's getting better than triple the mileage. But now he's upset because the car won't run on 100% water. So you can't please them all. But you know, we've had a few of those people that no matter how many times you say, I'm not going to sell you the plans to run on water, okay? 60% maybe, 65, but not 100% water. They'll turn around, call you right back and say, I need the plans for the water. We've had people that knew we were on tour, and they're I'll just call the main office and say, Paul told me to call. So they call up the main office going, hi, JD. Yeah, this is so-and-so. I was with Paul the other day at the workshop. Yeah, he said I should give you a call and get a copy of the plans for water. Well, the first few times that happened, JD's on the phone to me right away. What are you telling people we're giving these out for? I said, John, I wouldn't do that. I didn't say that. But people are going to try it. We've had a few people call up and say, hey, where's that generator I ordered 6 months ago? We look down our list. How did you pay for the generator? Well, I haven't yet. I'll pay for it when I get it. We've also had a few people that have said they have paid for product, and then when they go back and check their records, they call back and say, oops, I guess I didn't. So we definitely have had our experiences here in the last few years. And we are getting the product out as fast as we can. We have the new ceramic boat paint, which we did bring on board. When the inventor of that told us that he'd painted a boat 7 years ago, or gave the paint to a friend for his boat, and for 7 years, no barnacles on the boat. You just wipe your hand down the side or a rag and they wipe off. Or just start the engine up and take off. The water will push them off. So that was something we could see saving a lot of time, money, expenses, and it's one of the only environmentally friendly paints. The other paints for the bottom of your boats have poisons in them, lead in them, copper in them, all different types of goodies. And they're almost all being banned one after another because of the danger and ecology on the ocean. We've been told in the Great Lakes area, there's another type of problem they have up there, zebra mussels. It's just turn the equipment up and all. They can't stick to a ceramic finish. So that's another major application up there. We've had several people that have brought us videos, which I was hoping there would be a video machine here to play some. One of them is a little device about this big, about that tall, weighs about a pound, and he's got 2 wires coming out of it, and it puts out 100 watts. He's got another one that's a little bit bigger, puts out 1,000 watts. No moving parts, it just sits there. Just pulls the energy right out of the air. What's really neat is you have 5 people with the same type technology that all approach you within a 1-month period. 1 magnet, 79 cents. Yeah. Yep. It's a coil, a specific pattern of a coil with a magnet on the end. When I first saw that one, I had to replay the tape about a dozen times. It's like, wait a minute, what did I miss? But the inventor's out there screwing all these light bulbs in. You can see 100-watt light bulbs. He's got meters hooked to it all. Flip the switch, they all come on. You're going, okay, wait a minute. That's 100 watts, that's 1,000 watts. And the big unit that's 24 inches in diameter, 4.5 inches tall, it only puts out 12.5 kW. We are hoping very much to have a contract on that so we can have it out by the end of the year for residential use only. We are not happy with utility companies, but we don't want to cause them to go bankrupt. So by first saturating the residential market and giving them at least 5 to 7 years to start adjusting, they won't have to close their doors or have major problems. We had several attorneys call us up after I mentioned how the electric meters were all defective. A few major law firms, 2 out of New York, 1 out of San Francisco, called up and said, if you're looking for a firm to take these people in the utility business down, we would love to work with you. I said, I'm not going to take the utility companies down. Somebody else might. My goal is to get product out there to people cleaning up the planet. I don't have time for a lawsuit. Don't need it. But at least we know there's some legal firms out there that'll foot the whole tab. But it would throw the utility companies into one heck of a turmoil. If they had to pay the people back 10% or even 5%, that's a big chunk of money. But I don't know whether they should be responsible for that, or is that really the government? Yeah, they're not responsible for anything. You're right. They've never been responsible. Any other questions? Yes.
Are you gonna take one of those parts and see?
Yeah. Tom, would you mind? One of them.
When you buy the plans, you've got to buy the 10 at one time.
Well, no, it's a set of plans, and we give you a license that says you can apply these plans on 10 different pieces of equipment. Well, it can be your own. We've got several people that couldn't afford the plans, but between them and 4 or 5 neighbors, that they all chipped in together, and it's just good for those families, up to 10 total units. Yeah, we had a few farmers that were here yesterday, and they want to do it as a team, and I said, that's fine. I want to see how the 3 of them are going to split up 10 sets, though. Who's going to get that extra one?
The key thing with the plan, aside from looking at it and seeing how simple it is equations to figure out the lengths of things.
You'd need to know the diameter, the clearance, and the length of the run. Is it going to cooperate today?
So the actual, like, the actual reading of the plan,
They're quite simple instructions. They tell you all the little pieces and parts.
how much skill do you need to put that together?
You're not a mechanic.
Are you mechanically inclined? Okay. You should be able to do one in a day for a tractor or something like that. If it's going on your car, you're probably going to end up, plan on spending a week playing with it in your spare time. We've had several farmers that instead of buying parts, they always go out to the back shed there and try to build them. You repair what you got, you don't buy new. And the tinkerers like that usually have them up and running in 2 to 4 hours. We found a lot of kids that if they can tear an engine like this apart and rebuild it, they can build a GEET. I'm sorry? We're looking at trying to have the 350, the 454, 460, and I'd have to get a hold of the office to find out what other models. We'd like to have those out by the end of this year. Because right now the demand is very high for them. And the closer Y2K gets, or whatever it is, yeah, the faster people are saying, we want it now.
Question to ask you. Obviously, like when you sell the plan
Mhm.
to customer, and this country, the copyright, the patent, and force. But if you sell in China or South America, make a whole bunch of copy, and they get free out. What do you do about that?
We are going to be setting up in all countries, and the way we will be setting up is our own company will go in and set up a manufacturing facility and set up with distributors for that area. Every country is restricted within our agreements to manufacture only what is going to be used in that country. Now, if, let's say you are in China, and you get the plans, you start building them, we have litigation in place. Right now, if need be, it would take about 1 hour to go down to the federal courthouse and file 8,700 pages of evidence that I am the inventor. I spent a little over a year putting that document together, just in case I needed it. It would probably cost somebody $5 to $10 million just to respond. So we are prepared for that battle if it comes. Most countries that we've talked with, the people from those countries which had the same idea, well, what happens if I do this? You aren't getting any more products from our company. We'll just cut you off. You might get me one time, but the minute I find out you are producing something like that in that country, I'm going to come behind your back, and I'm going to come out with a water unit or something that makes this unit look bad. And you're going to get stuck with a lot of inventory. So by having the state-of-the-art technology, each one a little bit advanced over the other, we can come out with new and improved almost monthly. So if somebody did try to run with any portion of the technology, they're not going to get far. Back in 1984, I knew somebody had gone through my house several times. They'd gone through everything in the house looking for the plans. Didn't have any plans, but I knew what they were looking for. And I got tired of it, so I did up a set of plans, put at the top of the file folder, plans for a carburetor. Stuck it in my file cabinet. Took a hair, laid it across the top. So all I have to do is just look in there and I can see if somebody touched it. 3 days later, the hair's missing. Following Monday, second or third page of the Sacramento Bee. Aerojet had horrible explosion over weekend. I didn't give them the right plans. I showed them how to blow up an engine. And it worked. Up to that point, we had an engineer that kept coming by once a week, wanting to know if I'd consider working with him and the guys down at Aerojet. And I kept saying, no, no, no. After that, he didn't come back. Ford, they showed up. Up at the conference we did in Denver. And we'd been warned from Tesla Society, watch out, Ford, GM, and Chrysler like to come into these things. That's fine. They're welcome. Well, the guy from GM comes in. He was pretty pushy. Gives me his card. Well, here you go. I take the card. I'm looking up at this giant. Oh, pleased to meet you. I put the card in my pocket. No, no, no. You don't understand, son. I pulled the card out, put my glasses back on. I said, what did I miss? I'm with General Motors. I said, well, that's good. I'm with GEET. I'm in charge of research and development. I said, well, so am I. We got the same titles. Only I'm the inventor. He says, you're missing the boat, son. I said, what boat? You mean you don't want to work with General Motors? Well, my technology works with GM, Ford, Chrysler, anything I want to put it on. He said, are you dense or what? I said, what do you mean? I'm offering to take you, bring you into General Motors so we can start testing? I said, well, thank you, but no thank you. Wouldn't you want to see this on every brand new GM going out that assembly line? Well, I guess we can kick that one around. He's shaking his head. Where are you from? It's California. No. I mean, what planet are you from? You don't realize how big General Motors is. I said, oh, just a minute. Because if you count up every single piece of equipment that General Motors is going to make this next year, and you compare that to every single piece of equipment right now on this planet, and what you end up with is GM is about that much of my marketplace. So what do I need you for? And as I was walking off, he's going, you're crazy. You're crazy. I said, yeah, thanks. That afternoon, Good old boys from Ford are there. One of them's out there. He's got a rope in front of the car there, and he's just pushing as far as he can over the rope, trying to get drawings. Well, since we already knew that they were going to be there, we threw in 3 extra hoses, hooked to 3 extra valves. And those hoses had marbles in them. Didn't do anything, but they sure looked impressive. And this guy from Ford is leaning over there as far as he can get, drawing it all out. And Molly and I come strolling up beside him. Took our badges off and hid them in our pockets. What do you make of this? He said, it's real simple. This does this, and this does this. Both of us are holding back from laughing. But he's telling us all about it, how simple it is. I said, well, you think the inventor's going to be working with you guys on this? He said, no, I hear he's one crazy son of a gun. I said, oh, that's okay. Any idiot can build one of these. Wow, I like that. Molly and I walked back in. We get to our booth, put our badges back on. About 5 minutes goes by, and this guy from Ford's strolling through, and he comes to a dead stop. And he looks over and looks at the badge and walks off like this. There have been some highlights during these tours, though. We had one scientist who was absolutely convinced he was going to prove we were a fraud at the New Science Conference. He went around behind our backs telling everybody, you watch, Pantone, when it comes time to start that engine, isn't going to be able to start the engine. He'll have some excuse because it's physically impossible. That's the only way he's going to get out of this one without going to jail. So a lot of these scientists he was talking to are kind of buddies of mine over the years, and they're coming back to me going, watch out for him. He's telling everybody you're a fraud. So I waited till the end of my workshop. At the end of my workshop, I said, now we're going to go out and run the engines. And I pointed to this one scientist. I said, excuse me, sir, would you mind being my assistant today? He said, I'd love to. He goes out to the engine, pour our junk in there, and I start it up. He gets down on one knee and starts sniffing the exhaust. There's no exhaust coming out. It smells clean and fresh. But then he touches the muffler. He's got this funny look on his face, like, what? So after 2 or 3 tries like that, he realizes it's ice cold. He grabs onto that muffler. He said, what is this? And I looked over at Molly and I said, yes, this is what I was waiting for. Said, that's a muffler. I know that, but it's ice cold. I said, well, isn't it supposed to be? No. I said, I must be doing something wrong. You're making a fool of me. I said, no, you're doing a really good job all by yourself. He turned around and walked out. That night, as we were all picking up from the end of the conference, he came over to our table, and he says, I owe you an apology. I said, you do? He says, yes, I went behind your back telling everybody I thought you were a fraud. He says, it's obvious now, I know you're not a fraud, and I really was making a fool of myself. I said, well, I got to give you credit for that. You do a good job. But we've had so many of those fun times like that, and other times people are convinced there's got to be that hidden fuel tank, so let's sabotage something. We'll remove this screw. And it takes me a few minutes sometimes to figure out, okay, what did they take off this time? But with all the performances we've done, we'd like to pass that around to everybody so they can get an idea. Yes. Normally the rods will stay clean. But when you're using Coke, Mountain Dew, and everything else, occasionally you will get some of it up into the rod chamber. If you're running just on gas, diesel, or kerosene, they stay almost spotless. Yes?
How come it does it retain some magnetism? Is that why you
Yeah. Well, not only does the metal, now we also did that with the Pyrex, or ceramic. When we put the ceramic rod in and ran the engine, pulled the rod out, Molly's brother had set it down on the table right next to a compass, and he started to walk away, and he looked back, and the needle of the compass had swung over. And he, wait a minute. Ceramics you can't magnetize. So he runs it around, and he says, okay, we now have a magnet. Right. But you can flip it over, and that was one of the drawings I did yesterday, that if this were the magnet rod from there, you'd have north here or south here. If you flip it over, north will start traveling towards the center, and south will travel towards the center. And by looking at the distance they traveled, I can tell you where on the planet you're at. Because the poles are pulled back to true north, true south at exact proportion from where you are from the equator to the North Pole or the South Pole. Well, we've also found that same phenomenon when this engine is being run and the hot end of the exhaust is pointing north, pollution level can be down to 0. Turn the hot end to the south, and you're going to get a 5 to 10% increase in pollution. So the magnetic field of our planet does have a main direct bearing on the process. Yes?
And so you're saying it's caused by the vacuum pressure in opposite direction?
Mm-hmm.
So by using that principle, then we could probably make non-ferrous ceramic magnets.
During one of the tests on a 350 Chevy, a mechanic left a big wrench that was touching the top of the exhaust manifold there and over to the top of the engine. He didn't realize he'd left it sitting on top of the engine until he got over to the starter a few minutes later and started the engine up. And he sees the wrench. So he reaches over to grab the wrench and he can't move it. Turned the engine off, reached over again, and tugged on it to get it loose. Now this is one of the snap-ons, guaranteed not to be magnetic. He goes over and throws it on his bench. It hits the bench counter, which is rubber, and goes blink right up against the front of the cabinet. He's trying to get it off the cabinet, can't. So, a couple days later, Snap-on guy comes by. Need any tools? He says, well, I'd like to know if you can replace this one with one that's not magnetic. Guy goes over and he says, that's glue down there. He says, no. So he's tapping it with a hammer to get it off. Finally, it comes off the end, and he drives it out, picks it up. How did you do that? You can't magnetize that metal. I'll give you a new one, no problem. So he goes out to the truck, brings in a new wrench. About 2 hours later, he calls my shop back. Our corporate office would like to know how you got that to be magnetic. We'd be very interested in that technology. Well, we informed him not to let him know right now. There are some other strange phenomena like that we have to figure out. How are we going to market this part of it? But when you can leave a magnetic impression on glass, ceramics, we've had at least 6 or 7 people that have complained, you're going to love the way I say that, complained about being healed. One guy had a big blood blister under his eye that he'd had for about 8 months. He'd gone to doctors all over the place trying to get rid of it. He came to our shop, spent 3 days playing with the engines, went home. About 2 or 3 days later, he calls back. He said, Paul, has anybody ever mentioned that health problems go away? I said, yeah. Why? He said, well, remember that big blood blister I had? Yeah. He says, it's gone. And I have no other explanation for it. Well, maybe that caused it. I don't know. We had one young man who ran this in the house with the doors closed to the office. It was putting out 21 to 22% oxygen all day. And after running this for a day, he called up the next day and said, Paul, I'm not coming into work today. I said, okay, what's up? He said, well, I can use my hands again. I don't have carpal tunnel syndrome anymore. They feel great. Well, the only reason he was working for me doing a job like that of just holding the valves and running the engine is because he couldn't use his hands. And he said, whatever it was just went away. So we've had several people that have called us to say, have you ever had these complaints? So I'm not saying it cures anything. I'm just saying we've had complaints. But they're good complaints. I can live with those. If you do get around any of the GEET units, I will tell you now, please do not get too close to them, within a foot of them, with a credit card, unless you want to throw the credit card out. Because it does wipe out that magnetic field. Another phenomenon is if you take a videotape and pass it through that field when it's running. Not only did you erase the videotape, you can't retape it. It will not take anything again. It's a gone tape. Are there any other questions? The plans are $650, and that allows you to build up to 10 units for personal use, your family, or you can do it with a couple of neighbors. We just ask that nobody be in competition with us selling them. And it was a way that we can get them out to a lot of people. No other questions? Yes.
Have you had any independent laboratories test this where you have a documented report?
We've had 2 or 3 small laboratories that have bought the units and they're doing their own independent testing. We've had some scientists that we brought in to do some testing. We are not seeking that level of testing. We're waiting for it to come to us. About a month and a half ago, we embarrassed the director of White Sands Missile Range by mentioning him in our newsletter. My wife had put it in there that the director of White Sands took a nice 3-day weekend to meet with us in Kentucky and see the engines run. He even brought his own crude oil. And when the newsletter went out, we didn't know that we had friends at the Pentagon, but somebody at the Pentagon gets the GEET sheet. And they called the director at White Sands up and said, how come we don't have a report on this GEET technology? He said, it must have got lost in the fax room. I'll get you a copy of it tomorrow. He immediately called us up, gave us the credit card number, and said, ship me an engine. I need more information on you as fast as I can. He decided to buy an engine, put it in testing right now. He also asked to have one of every product we build. Just start shipping products out. They've got to start testing everything we're doing.
Well, the big testing firm or company that everyone's familiar with is Underwriters Laboratory, UL approved, and I'd just be curious to see if you approach them.
No.
No.
60 Minutes, I believe it was, about a year and a half ago, did a special on the UL labs, and it explained to the general public how many thousands of homes had home fires because the UL label on there said that they had tested Mr. Coffee, and Mr. Coffee makers were burning homes down. When they were put to the question of how could this have happened, they said, well, it depends on how much money the person has. With enough money, it goes to the front of the list. We try making a pot of coffee with it, and we approve it. Their testing was not very official. Lawrence Livermore Labs, we talked with them. That was back in the early 80s. I was informed immediately, do not admit you have it on the property. So let's talk hypothetically, because if you bring technology like that onto government property, we have to confiscate it. I heard the same thing from Sandia Laboratory. Most of the bigger laboratories work with military. I don't. We were approached in 1984, 85 to put it on tanks, assault vehicles, weapons of destruction, and we said, no thanks. Don't need them. I would much rather put it on the civilian cars and help the people.
Are you offering any special show discount if someone were to buy a number of units or plans or anything today?
Well, anyone who buys the plans would get their $75 they paid to get in here discounted from it. It's a standard policy. If anybody wants to buy a mini GEET, I would say, because they did pay to get in here, we'd knock $25 off that.
And since we have a wedding that's supposed to be starting in about 30 minutes, I think I need to run and get a suit on. And if you have any further questions, Tom here can help you.